My name's John Starr. For those of you that weren't here this morning, I'll just do a quick introduction. I've been with Excitech for 6.5 years, and prior to that, I was a workplace technology consultant for GSK, amongst other things there. And that was to have responsibility of the FM systems which supported the workplace throughout the GlaxoSmithKline estate. So it was a large estate, mix of science and office space, and during my time there we went through some significant refurbishments, the introduction of a new HQ building in Brentford, and I supported the kind of agile working environment both in offices and in labs. So at Glaxo there was quite a push for making labs work smarter, so some of the functions that we ran there were to try to open up the static labs which were historic throughout research, and to have a flexi lab concept which was quite interesting, probably 15 years back now, to enable labs to be set up overnight or over the weekend with new gas lines, or changing their function from a dry lab to a wet lab, those types of things. And those sorts of technologies were quite ahead of their time in terms of reconfiguration of space, which is what we're seeing now more in office environments. So using those experiences has been very useful, certainly at Glaxo, to promote better space utilisation and get better asset utilisation out of lab space. I was also in charge of using Lean Sigma methods to promote operational efficiency throughout facilities there. So I heard Mark talking about some of the stuff that he'd done, but similarly, the Lean Sigma activity at Glaxo was a combination of Lean activity and Six Sigma methodologies to try to identify waste in process. So throughout facility operations, we were able to apply those methods to look at how maintenance was delivered, predominantly throughout the corporate part of their environment. I've also got experience there from dealing with kind of pre-BIM new build handovers. So some of the experiences there were quite kind of shocking in terms of a campus of large proportion with a pre-build set of room numbers, a construction set of room numbers, and a handover set of room numbers. And in a pre-BIM world, the challenges that gives you in terms of consolidating this, creating compliance systems and making sense of it all from a user's perspective. So since being with Excitech, I've been leading consultancy on some of our largest FM implementations. I'm a prior customer of Excitech back from Glaxo days, so I knew that they were a good bunch that could be trusted. Joined them and was given some fairly meaty challenges in terms of consulting on some of our larger clients from an archibus perspective, using the product to manage estates from space and maintenance, so government organisations and universities. So I've also been supporting some of our clients adopt BIM and BIM to FM, so some of that experience we hope to share with you today. And also been championing, I've been a champion of mobile technology in the FM environment, so using that to connect staff that support our facilities with the users and the facilities themselves. So in terms of today's next section, we're looking at the challenges of data transfer. To start with, I just thought from last week, I had something in my mind, and that was the challenges I was going through last week. So last week I was delivering a project to a large university, which was moving from a paper-based docket system for maintenance to a mobile system. And so part of my job, not only to go through training lots of very friendly engineers, which were very happy about the change, but was to sit on their help desk, and that was quite an experience. So 2 days on a busy, large campus university help desk is an eye-opening experience. The volumes of calls that you receive is astounding. The range of problems you receive is astounding. I just want to go through some of those types of challenges to give you an idea of the problems that you might experience in an FM environment that you might not be aware of. So this is the kind of things which talk about. So a job comes through, I can't contact the customer, they haven't put their details down. Okay, that's going to be a challenge when finding where they are or finding what the problem is. I've got no access to the location. I've had a fault reported, it's a high priority, but the area is locked or I don't have access to it. We just move through. Duplicated jobs. I've had that job already, therefore I've now got 2 billable bits of work, I don't know which one to perform. I need to isolate the area before I can do anything, I need someone else to do something. And we just move on. And you can imagine that as we move through, we're seeing lots of inefficiency, lots of problems, lots of things which are stopping me delivering work, lots of things which are preventing the university or the assets be, bless you, I think, or just cheering. But basically things which will stop the assets performing to their capabilities and being operational again. So this kind of weren't all this particular university's problem, but these are a kind of summary of things which I've experienced in terms of job delivery. And just tried to think about how we can resolve these and how kind of data transfer BIM to FM might sit within that. There's obviously one core kind of thread which will run through any of these problems, and that is information. So a better information model. We've got things like the asset information, so having a rich amount of information about the assets that you're performing maintenance against will help you in terms of being able to understand its history, understanding what the tools are required to fix it, what the correct settings are for that asset. Being able to capture the live information of that asset as you repair it, so understanding what the meter readings are, for instance. And then actually just the process, so having a documented process for what I'm going to be doing, having access to the documents which are going to support the maintenance of that asset. All of this is information, and all this is potentially lacking in FM operations which exist all over the place prior to BIM. So most of our clients might have heard of BIM, might have some experience with BIM, but would have limited data which is born out of BIM. And so there's some opportunities here. So those opportunities we're going to look at in terms of data transfer. In terms of how increased data quality can support your maintenance activity, having a system at your fingertips which allow you to understand your assets is important. Here we're looking at a system which will show you some images of what the asset looks like, so I know that I'm fixing the right thing. It will show me the serial numbers, so I can be absolutely sure that it's the same piece which is failing continually. I can understand who owns it, the relationship that those people have to the space. I can understand potentially the system that asset forms a part of, so I can understand if there's going to be a potential for affecting a wider audience if I take this system or this asset offline. I can also have better assets, and so if I've got better assets which have got more connectivity and feed information back to me, I can actually perform asset management in a smarter way. I can actually do that based in condition rather than on fixed period intervals. If I'm using mobile technology, I can instantly get that information on the devices which I'm going to be using. So that can be either the job details, it could be the asset details. It's all about being connected and saving routines. All of those help desk calls which I was processed resulted in time being lost. I could see the hours or minutes being waited and the delay that would cause. Having mobile technology is hopefully going to help the university cut those points out by allowing those information flows to be far more rapid. Finally, the kind of future model, are we going to get to a place where we can actually visualize the assets we're repairing using augmented reality or some sort of hybrid view of our estate to understand not only what we're looking at but the data that sits behind it, and bring that all into one easy to access image or environment. just important to remember, we're not just talking about assets. So obviously a key focus of the BIM to FM movement is around getting decent asset information across. It's the biggest kind of asset list in terms of data that you're looking at for a BIM to FM flow, but it might not be the only one. In terms of activities, the FM teams or the estates teams will be managing a large range of services, and they're not just focused on the asset. So what can the data support in addition to just what you've got currently doing? So this is kind of around how we shouldn't be constrained by the current systems we operate and the current processes. There are going to be new opportunities that having enhanced levels of data and potentially 3D models can bring us. So if you think about activities like space management, historically it's been a challenge to get occupiers of space to take ownership of the space they occupy. It's a huge challenge because obviously that's a big cost because it directly relates to the estate that you're having to provide for them. By providing 3D tools to help them visualize the estate they've got is a very powerful way of presenting that ownership and an improvement over current kind of 2D plans or room listings, etc. So we've also got how the estate is repaired and how it's renovated. So a potential new use of 3D tools in FM would be to present 3D visualizations of renovation, so of new areas which are being constructed, of new buildings which are going to be delivered to clients, and helping those clients understand what they're going to look like, what the challenges are going to be in using them, accelerating that design process ahead of time. In terms of repair, we can look at how potentially using 3D modelling of repair situations might allow us to take spaces down or offline for less time. So if we're able to understand the height of particular units within space and understand challenges around access, we might be able to shut that space down or operate the maintenance in a far more reduced period of time. And certainly where we've got our clients certainly have areas which are very high profile, very high customer access. Taking those offline for any length of time is not something they're looking to do. And so squeezing maintenance activities into a shorter space of time is going to be a benefit. And using 3D tools, that's possible. It's also possible to think about sustainability and occupancy comfort in terms of 3D. So actually bringing this data into customer focus again to allow the sustainability angles of their occupancy of data of space to be shown to them. So in terms of what an ideal scenario might look like for data transfer for a BIM to FM model, first of all, we can look at how the people receiving the information may have been involved in the specification of the requirements. So this could be from a design perspective, so to have FM and estates team input into the design of new facilities, into the BIM process, have them hand over their specification of the data that they want to be included into model creation. And so by having them involved in that process, it's going to help them shape the data and shape the deliverable to an asset which is going to be easy to maintain and a data set which is going to be aligned to what they're going to be maintaining against. It's important that the data will be managed in a model. Hopefully they're set up for that and can receive that high level of information. And it's going to be using consistent standards. So any standards they have in place at the moment, they want the data to be received within those standards. It would be good if the entire estate has been developed using a 3D tool, which is the same. Moving between 3D packages isn't fun, and moving between 2D and 3D isn't particularly fun for the end users. Having to understand that part of your estate has got a high level of data and part of your estate has got a low level of data is a difficult sell for a FM team when trying to get people to take space in an older part of your estate. So an ideal situation we would have 3D modelling tools to capture your entire estate. The FM solution in place should be ready to receive data. It should be primed, set, ready to receive both graphical data, non-graphical data, and documents which are going to support that data flow. And the FM teams can benefit from a high standard of information because it's going to help forward their processes in terms of maintenance. Unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, so forget all that. It's never going to happen. The reality is a lot more like this. The engagement of FM and estates and operators in design and in BIM process is still limited, and that's work in progress. I think there's a lot to be done on both sides of that equation to bring them further into that process. Systems and standards do evolve during delivery cycles. We can be talking a number of years, and within those periods, as we know, system versions change, technology changes, sometimes strategy changes within organisations about the technology they want to use. Estates aren't always as straightforward as I see, so often a lot of my focus is around the narrow vision I have of clients, and that's around owner-occupiers, because we provide a lot of FM solutions to owner-occupiers. But I always forget that not everyone owns their own building. Not everyone is leasing space or is not leasing space. So the potential for the motivation for each data transfer isn't always a level playing field. The customer at the end of it isn't always pulling that information through the process because it might not be in their interest to do so. So there's a wide range of use of technology within FM, a wide range from high to low in terms of technology, but also just in the sheer number of different applications which are in use. There's not a single few applications which can be identified as industry standard. It varies from sector to sector, from client to client. So there is a wide range of FM systems in place. Not all of them, in fact, very few of them are truly BIM ready. We've also got the complexity of internal and outsourced FM teams. We've got, again, some of our clients have got purely internal staff where they can hopefully motivate them to be engaged in this process and see where the investment in their time will save money for the organisation they work for. But when you've got an outsourced set of FM teams, the motivations are different, and so getting that buy-in is a lot more challenging when talking about data flow or specification of buildings that they might not even be employed by that company when the buildings come online, or there might be a soft landing process. So, there's a lot of complexity around that, which murkies the water of this ideal model. So this was something we just looked at in terms of what are those challenges for providing BIM data to owners. This isn't our work. This is 4BT's, which I think are a US construction software company, which polled their users to look at the challenges they've got. Now, I wouldn't stand by the figures, but in terms of any of these types of surveys, they're anecdotal. You could say, this particular figure is wrong because of that. But what I think it does show is that there's always plenty of reasons for not doing something, and even if, especially when you don't know about it. So kind of the lack of knowledge is the key blocker here, regardless of the specifics of why these particular group of people felt they weren't getting the BIM data they wanted. So we're going to look a bit now about kind of data receivers. So my role within Excitech is to number of roles in Excitech. So we do a bit of selling. So we sell software. We also support a lot of software, and that's usually in this IWMS arena. So this kind of broad systems which support FM, and that's around the space, maintenance, project, real estate, and sustainability areas. Now, for each client that we have, there's not a single model which this hooks up to. Some will have an IWMS solution and they'll be using it partially. Some will have it and they'll be using it fully. Some will entirely manage their estate using point solutions in each of these areas. To set up any of these data transfers, we'd need to understand where we want to push data to. So functionally where those systems are being used to manage data that we're looking to bring into our FM environment. So it's good to make a map. The map might look something like this. So we have our Revit data coming from a BIM process into a IWMS solution like Archibus. Or it might look something more like this. This is not just shameful product placement, by the way, but it is. Excitech FM, so a point solution for space management. We might be looking at the possibilities there. Or we might be looking at something new, something more kind of streamlined approach to FM. So BIM 360 Ops is a new product which much improved from a few years back, but certainly in soft landing environments, providing some opportunities for people where you're looking for a high level of data, but your engagement might be limited. So quite a few ranges there. The essential part is that BIM data can flow between each of these products, driven by users with a limited or varying degrees of expertise, but bringing their skills, they'll be able to allow data to flow between Revit and these FM systems. When looking at any handover, we can map out the data flow from a one-way sense. So BIM data flowing from a model or whatever the handler is. But we also think about the model itself. So a big decision for FM operators will be what the life will be for the model after handover, and there will be a lot of challenges around that. So one of the best approaches, I feel, is to try to court the opinion and the input from the stakeholders around your business. While you might have direct responsibility for it, it's possible and likely that the resource implications of having a model post-handover will be greater than you're currently geared up to support. Therefore, having buy-in from a wider part of the organisation is going to be a very good way of certainly justifying it, if not funding it. Questions that you might look to answer are, who's got responsibility to maintain the model? Is it directly ours within estates? Is it going to be looked after by a contractor through a handover period? Do we have any of the right resources to manage that process? Do we have the skills? Do we want them? Do we want the responsibility of doing it? Do we actually know what the model should contain? Do we know what we want to support in terms of its life cycle? And who's going to pay for it? Remembering this might be our first BIM project, we might be receiving BIM data for the first time, it probably won't be the last, so any impact to these type of questions need to be sustainable across the life cycle of our portfolio and our estate. So this is just around communication. So in terms of data flow, I view it as like communication. This is one-way communication. Data flow from a BIM process to an FM system might be viewed in the same way. In this case, and in FM systems, it's really up to the receiver to determine the language or set the parameters by which the data is going to be accepted. So for those who weren't here this morning, we talked about using Archibus connectors to receive employee data into the system. In this case, the connector was the gatekeeper for information flow, and really just presenting the Archibus data structure as a gatekeeper for the flow of information, and rejecting anything that wasn't understood and accepting everything that was understood. So it's just important to understand that to have seamless flow of information, it's important that receiver is aware of what's being sent to it. But that's not always going to be possible. I'm sure we discussed earlier that there's not always an FM system in place. The client doesn't always know what the FM system is going to be used. They might be in the process of being replaced. And so we have an alternative, COBIE. My only BIM joke for the day, because I don't know many, I'm new to BIM, is the COBIE mandate isn't that we must use COBIE, but every BIM presentation must have a slide with COBIE on it. So here's my one. My experience of COBIE is probably very similar to everyone else's in that from an owner-occupier's point of view, given the choice, I'd take COBIE over nothing. but that's kind of where I'd pitch it. Obviously, the limitations are numerous. But in terms of where it's strong, an industry-recognised standard in a very fluid industry, we can only admire. You know, facilities management doesn't have that many standards, and it's been going for 50 years. To have an industry-recognised Excel-based system, well, it's great. We've got something to work around. So then it's mandated, we discussed, auditable. So just being able to use this common agreed format to not only handle the data and be a data transporter, but also using it as a clear method of auditing so that we can confirm when we've received data. Flexible to a degree. Obviously, it's not controlled in how you input data into COBIE, so there's flexibility there, which can be a benefit. In terms of the cons, though, it's flexible. It's way too flexible. The amount of data that can be put into a COBIE sheet, which is not been validated, can give handlers of COBIE information from an FM side real problems. The alignment of how data is structured into COBIE needs to align to data structure in your FM system. And if things like the classification of assets, am I collecting one asset or am I collecting a number of assets? Things like this, which create data flow challenges. Just the data quality, in terms of where we can add data, if it's not going to be spell checked, if it's not going to be consistent, that's just going to make our CAFM, FM system, IWMS solution very poor when it comes to, if we introduce those errors into an FM system, it's going to instantly muck up our data in terms of benchmarking. If we've got two classes of asset which are actually the same, being split out by a typo, that's going to give us skewed results in terms of asset performance. It's the lowest common denominator, so it's, in absence of anything else, it's there. So the other methods, if COBIE doesn't have to be used, then we've got some other methods. So Excel-based template collection, really just COBIE, your COBIE, so a COBIE that you've designed. It sounds like a challenge, a big task, but actually a lot of customers, FM providers would be able to give them templates which are actually going to write their own COBIE for them. These are just data import sheets into an FM system. So if that can be actually imported and form part of the data flow, then you've actually built the standards by which you want to receive data. There are software interfaces, so CAFM solutions, IWMS solutions can receive data direct from BIM modelling packages. We could actually just get rid of the requirement for 3D. If a client decides that this is a one-off and they're happy with an AutoCAD-based level of information, obviously you can take that out and it's a valid method of transfer of data for people that don't want to have that added inconvenience, or added burden of managing high level of information associated with BIM. Obviously nothing that we'd ever advocate, but the reality is that a lot of people will be doing that, and that's why there's a slow take-up of BIM to FM. Manual data entry, it probably happens. I'm hoping that it happens less now, but I probably wouldn't hear about it anyway. I probably have come across it when it has happened. There are standard libraries which can assist the flow of information in terms of setting up standards by which, say, asset maintenance from SFG 20 or asset classification could be pre-written into the flow of information. Probably not replacing the whole flow, but certainly creating standards by which the flow could be managed. And then we've got things like bespoke database links. So bespoke interfaces could be pretty much as we've described here. So system to system, so from your BIM system to one or many FM systems. That could be direct or via a holding table. So you could actually use a simple table or one of the other holding tables to handle that flow of information between your systems, protecting both the data and the systems. We can also do it via temporary holding systems as well. I think you'd probably, the focus around this would be where you had an organisation which has potentially developed their own in-house management systems. They've got good access to IT skills and good knowledge of the data structure within those systems. In those cases, a bespoke flow of information might be suitable. From the downside of things, we could be looking at some increased costs. So it's flexible. It won't impact on your existing systems. If you don't have a BIM-ready space management solution or a BIM-ready maintenance help desk system, then this might be a way to go. But it's going to be probably a lot of work for your IT departments or consultants like us, and it could have a limited lifespan because once it's written, it could be replaced by the systems moving on. It's also not particularly useful for auditing because of the flexibility involved in the creation of it. So if we look then at software interfaces, these are obviously a developing area. So Archibus is my area of expertise, has had data integration with via Revit for probably 4 years. Mario will correct me if I'm wrong, from Archibus Inc. And that over that life cycle has improved drastically to allow for flexible data manipulation, so we can control where data is going to be piped, and we can control the flow of information, so we can nominate, say, the primary source of information post-connection. I can say that I'm always going to be updating this data string in my FM system, or I can say I'm always going to manage it in my connecting model, and I can do that on a field-by-field basis. So we've got a flexible system here. Also, recently Archibus has pushed it beyond just the tables that it wants to manage. It's also seen it an opportunity to receive data across the whole model for onward use. And so Archibus could be a data handler for onward systems which you're not choosing to use Archibus to manage. Obviously, it's got integration straight into the Revit, so we've got tools which sit within Revit to allow that data transfer to happen. That exists both in 2D sense, so we've got the ability to get that information out into standard type software interfaces from a 2D perspective, but also moving forward now, representing that information into 3D from an FM point of view. So I suppose the challenge here to people like Mario isn't just to stand still with this kind of technology, it's to keep moving, because obviously while the data is there, it presents opportunities. It's how do you actually really get the value out of those opportunities by developing new, wonderful FM systems which will really push the limits of the 3D elements of data, the access of always connected information flows. So these types of things which will actually make the data that you've spent a lot of money getting into your system, make it start working for you. So we can define our data with software integration. It's auditable, it sits neatly within a system. We're guaranteed good data quality because we're actually validating as it moves into the system. It's quick, we can get these flows running in an automated way, get your buildings up and running very quickly. Some of the downsides are it's a bit rigid, it links two applications, therefore you've got the intrinsic problems of having two platforms which you've installed, therefore there's going to be challenges around that, and software compatibility. So that's kind of the now situation. Well, what about the future? Well, I think this comes from Gartner as their nexus of forces. I think that was a typo, not the forces of Nexus, which sounds more like a superhero movie. The four areas that they see really changing the business of the built environment over the next sort of 10 years around IoT, big data, the cloud and social media. So Internet of Things from an FM point of view is having a lot of traction. We had a lot of interest earlier this morning about sensors, around sensors supporting occupancy, around integrating building data into all aspects of FM management. While it's been around, certainly in my times at Glaxo, we were investigating it. We were looking at the costs of doing these types of things, having BMS turn off meeting rooms that weren't in use based on usage, or priming space only when it's going to be occupied. While those things are still in place, IoT just creates a platform by which it can be done in a far more cost-effective manner. So while FM operators will start using IoT more for all of that whole range of activities that they're supporting, it also means that the level of information they're expecting through new builds will be increasing. We've had some discussions around why do we have to retrofit these sensors onto chairs? Where are the chairs with sensors built in? Where does these smart types of furniture going to start coming around? I did see on my LinkedIn page, check it out later, there's I think it was Honda have come up with some meeting chairs which park themselves. So watch out for that. That looks like a lot of fun. Some safety issues to worry about, but you know, the movement of IoT in FM is going to be huge. It's going to really revolutionise how people connect to space. We've got big data, so again, the ability to process quantities of data. We discussed earlier about how our mobile systems will collect better and more data, which are going to help us improve the performance of our teams, our operations. The Airbus factory, where they're developing tools which know what their job is and what the correct torque pressure for the part of the plane that they're fixing is to help eliminate errors, is just the start of where kind of big data connected to IoT is kind of heading in terms of not just FM management but construction. So cloud, just moving technology into a more service-orientated model, allowing GDPR friendly, supportive, pushing data into server centres off-site. A lot of our clients historically have got on-premise solutions, and that has benefits in terms of security and stability, but it also gives us challenges in terms of collaboration and also data flow. So there's opportunities there as we move to a more SaaS-driven FM model. We can see better data flow between collaborative systems. And social media. Probably the more sceptical amongst you think, no, this is still just people talking in presentations. The kind of changed when I said, when someone asked me, can I have that email as a tweet instead of receiving my job notification? I don't want an email. I want you to tweet me back. And I was like, I've got to start thinking about this, because it's not just talk. We're actually going to be asked to do this. And as we do that, it raises the profile and raises the criteria of what we need to deliver in terms of BIM to FM. So the recommendation, you'll all be glad to know we've got one single recommendation, and that is for data integration, data flow. No, we haven't. We've got a pragmatic approach. As for all the different reasons we discussed, there isn't going to be one solution to fit all. What all we can recommend is that people who are responsible for this part of the process take a realistic approach to the challenges they've got and look at how much understanding of the information they've got, what the systems are involved, where there are particular high-value activities that they can invest in and get real value from, and what's really achievable. These are just some of the questions. There'll be others which you could insert into your organisation or to your client, but really just to be flexible enough to understand that where data flow can happen well, you should accept it. Where it can't, you've got to come up with alternatives, and where there is high value to be had, to make sure you take that, and also to be realistic about what's achievable. So to summarise just this session, we've done a bit about the value of BIM to FM for building operators. We looked at some of the challenges they face. We looked at options for data flow, and we've touched on the future as well.